Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, an interview-style podcast providing insights on how to lead people. Proudly brought to you by Human Interactions Australia. All right, welcome to our next episode of Leadership Unlocked. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Daniel Murray from Empathic Consulting. Welcome, Dan. Nice to have you.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for inviting me. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. You've made a big move away from the city, so we're doing this on Zoom today, which is nice. So I believe the move's gone well for you.
Yeah, we've moved to a little place called Bribie Island, which is just north of Brisbane. It's paradise and no regrets at all. It beats the Sydney traffic, I can tell you.
Yeah, I love it up there. It's quite nice. I think there's another island close by called Coochie Mudlow or something, isn't that, man?
Yeah, there's a whole heap of islands. So Bribie, the big ones are Moreton and Stradbroke, north and south Stradbroke. Moreton Island's just stunning. So, yeah, if you ever get up here, we can go and have a look.
Sounds great. So tell us about Empathic Consulting. This is something that's reasonably new for you over the last few years. So tell us a little bit about it and what you're up to.
Yeah, we're actually coming up to 6 years now, so we've sort of been around a little while, and the focus of the work we do is really helping leadership teams to develop the way they work together more effectively. So our most common sort of way in which we work with a leadership team will be through developing greater understanding between the leaders, developing greater self-awareness of their own traits, biases and ways of working, and then looking to shape that into to really reinforce organisational culture and trust. That's a lot of the work we do. Also do a lot of speaking at conferences and events, work with other organisations in not-for-profit and government sectors. But the main thing that we're sort of working on is that space around how do you get a leadership team to really gel and feel like a committed team.
Yeah, nice. That's awesome. And so you've been in some leadership roles yourself. I know you've been in some large organisations, so things like QBE and CommBank and so forth. What were some of the leadership roles that you had?
Look, going right back, I worked for a little tuition business in Brisbane, and they sort of gave me a go at leading very, very early on. In my early 20s, and I ran a few centres. Look, I've led programs of work that have been big cost reduction programs. Let's cut $130 million out of a business, and so you've got to build a team together quickly. A lot of those stakeholders aren't necessarily people you manage or lead all the time, so you've got to rapidly form them, right through to running the IAG Foundation for a number of years. So, working with a business and charities and trying to really build that commitment across those different groups. And again, having a range of different stakeholders that you have to manage and support and grow as you work through. So pretty diverse range of different organisations and spaces to work in.
So what were some common threads you discovered when you're in your own leadership style? What were some common threads you saw come through?
Oh, look, I think the first big learning for me was humility. And, when you get given a role early on and young, you sort of think, I have to put my foot down, I have to make my mark here, I have to stamp my authority, or anyway, that's what I was sort of thinking early on. And that just doesn't work. So having humility to not think you know all the things you need to know and to be able to ask good questions and listen well are really the things that I sort of learned over my career. And particularly when we're working as almost a consultant type role inside an organisation, we're asked to come in to help fix a problem that we're not experts in understanding the content of. So you've really got to be, and I think this is a rule for most leaders, you've got to be able to have full accountability and step into that space, but also not expect to have all the answers and be able to coordinate and pull together people and get people to work together effectively to find those answers that maybe no one knows yet, but we're all working towards them. The world's complex and there's lots of things going on here. We might need to explore a bit more.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was interviewing John Buchanan, the former Aussie cricket coach, yesterday, actually, and he said a similar thing. He knew that he couldn't have all the answers because he had a career, but not a huge career, and he's managing people like Shane Warne. It was bringing the right people in to help a person like Shane Warne was really important, knowing that he wasn't going to be that person to do it, but he was a I guess he was the architect and the instigator of making that happen, right? So
Yeah, and that's really, I think, one of the key things of being a leader is understanding the playing field we're on, understanding the environment we're in, and where are the stresses, where are the tensions. You're almost standing back and looking at that map of your organization and the market around it, and thinking, well, what do we need in the future to make sure we're in a better place going forward? Not stepping into those roles, not. I was talking to he's a former farmer, actually, Mike Logan, who was telling me that one of the things he really struggled with in his career was when we get under pressure, we tend to go back to the things we're good at. And so if you're a technical leader, if you're an accountant or a farmer or an engineer, when times get tough, you jump back on the tools.
Yeah, right.
And that's not where you're needed as a leader. It's actually the worst place for you to be, because if no one is looking at that big map and really thinking it strategically, then no matter how hard you work on those tools, you're never going to get those big problems solved, and you're never going to have you're basically just going to keep creating the chaos that continues your need to be on the tools, if you like. So it's really about those leadership stepping back out of the work and having that broader perspective.
You mentioned the word trust early on, and I think from what you're saying there, you end up not building a team of trust by jumping in all the time. People will go, well, he's going to jump in if it's too stressful, too hard. He's going to just jump back on the tools, right?
Well, there's a few different things that can happen there. One can be that trust, that feeling of, well, you don't trust me to do the work, so you're jumping in, and therefore that's frustrating. But you can also build, and that'll often show up as a negative sort of in relationship. But the more dangerous often is this feel-good relationship of the boss is here to save the day, and you create a reliance relationship. So a friend of mine, she had a team who would just call her constantly. They just call her all the time and ask her questions. And we were at lunch one day, and I said to her, they keep calling because you keep giving them answers.
Yeah.
And, it's safe for them to not have to come up with their own answer and get their own idea. It's safe for them to just rely on you. But the problem is, you become the bottleneck and the sort of the ceiling of your organization, because there's only one of you and you can't do it all.
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you develop a team that's not so reliant on? Well, obviously you've got to butt out yourself a little bit, but how do you build that trust and that non-reliance on yourself as a leader?
Yeah. It's not particularly easy, because trust is subjective, it's intangible, it can be broken very quickly and builds very slowly, and there's lots of different factors. The big thing that I see work a lot is leaders who really foster more curiosity. So asking more questions, sitting in the unknown for longer, and allowing the other people in the team to feel like it's okay to sit in the unknown a little bit. It's okay not to know. It's okay to sit around and throw ideas around and explore. When you create that sort of an organization, what starts to happen is people understand each other more, because they ask questions. Hey, Craig, what do you do? How would you approach this? Or what have you seen work in the past? What's the problem with doing it this way? Well, all these questions foster more understanding of each other. And when you get more understanding, when I understand you, it's much easier for me to trust you. Because when I see you do something, I've got a better understanding of the intent and what was going on behind it. And so trust gets built in this space. And as the trust builds, we ask more questions. We get this virtuous cycle of curiosity builds understanding, understanding drives trust, trust helps more curiosity to take place. And we sort of start spinning upwards.
And then people become more open to share, because you've created an environment that I don't want to be too corny on this, but it's a safe environment to be able to share what you think, whether it's agreed or not agreed to.
Even if you don't want to use the word safe, it's just the way things happen here. It's normal. We normalize asking questions. If you go to a fancy restaurant or walk into a library, you don't even need a sign to know that you can't yell and talk loudly, right? Because it's just what everyone else is doing.
Yes.
And so we learn on how to act in an environment by what everyone else is doing. So if everyone else is asking questions, it's very natural for me to ask questions. It might take a bit of time. I might be a bit gun shy at first, but it's this is what we mean by culture. It's that, how it feels around here. It's what our subconscious brain picks up on and interprets from the environment.
I love the idea of this question to understand, not to question to point a finger or question to put blame. It's summed up in that word of curiosity, isn't it?
Yeah, and I use curiosity rather than ask questions because, do you really think we should do it that way? It's not a question. It's not a curious question. It's got a question mark, yes, but it's hiding, right? So the idea of curiosity is we're building a culture where people are really interested in not only what we do right now, but what are the problems we're trying to solve and how can we do it in the future differently? And all organizations need that because the world keeps changing so fast. We need to be thinking differently.
Yeah, and we saw that, right? We saw that through COVID, how quick we did have to adapt, and it was crazy times. So the name of your business is Empathic Consulting.
Correct.
So you've gone down this narrow view of empathy, and everything's around empathy, which I love. But that's not important whether I love it or not. It's more about why did you get down that track? How did you get led into this concept of empathy?
Firstly, I'm glad you like it, Craig. That's important.
That's important.
Thanks. So working in big corporates like CommBank, I was working on large strategic programs of work. Now, I had a degree in mathematics and an MBA, so a very analytical thinker, loved the logic and the rationale behind the way we would design, whether it be an org change, whatever it might have been. The thing I saw, though, is we would then try to implement or we'd hand it over to the business to implement, and things would go wrong. Now, some of my peers might have said, that's because they stuffed it up on implementation. And I sort of had a different view and thought, well, maybe we're missing something when we're designing these beautiful designs of, sitting in beautiful chevrons and PowerPoint decks that we would make. Maybe we're missing something. And my theory was what we're missing was this wild card of the complexity of people. So people are the most complex things you'll ever encounter. Your brain's the most complex system in the known universe, right? It's out of control, the level of complexity that happens inside of our heads. So when we just looked at the people in these spreadsheets, for example, and called them an FTE, and, if you came to work every day, you're a 1. If you only worked 3 days a week, you're a 0.6. That idea of we can just treat humans as these numbers, I thought that was the big problem. I thought that was wrong.
Which is interesting, given your maths background.
Well, yeah, that's right.
It's very easy to lean that way.
And that's the way I was leaning. And incidentally, when you look at statistics globally, we are more analytical now than we have been in previous generations. There's more data to look at, so it makes sense.
Yeah.
But the problem was we need to understand that wild card, which is people. And as soon as I sort of looked at that, I went, well, how do people behave? And that is Pandora's box. That's because we don't behave logically all the time. If we were logical, we'd all, the number of cars would be more like a small, medium, and large version than the millions of varieties. If we were logical, we'd all wear the same, fabric. I was talking to people at a conference the other day, and they were largely women in the audience. I said, if we were logical, you'd wear the same clothes because it'll reduce the unit cost and make it more accessible. But if you turn up at a wedding wearing the same dress as someone else, you give them a high five and go, well done, rational sisters. No. Right? You're horrified because we don't make rational decisions all the time.
Well, we still want to be unique, don't we? We are unique, yet we still want to be unique.
Well, this is the thing. And then if you ask someone why, they'll try to tell you, but they don't know.
Yeah.
And this is really where empathy is about trying to understand what drives people. Why do people do what they do? What are those underlying drivers that maybe they aren't even conscious of? So we think about your brain having the conscious part and the subconscious part. A lot of our decisions are driven out of the subconscious, and it's not at all rational. And then we ask people why they did it, but we're not asking the subconscious, we're asking the conscious brain. And so we immediately get this disconnect.
Yeah.
So for me, it was around empathy being a skill that leaders can develop and a capability they can develop so that they can better understand those other factors. They can better understand, well, hang on, how might someone else, if I was in this situation, I'd act this way. But if they're in that situation and they see the world differently to me, what decisions might they make? How do I factor that into my decision-making process or to my design so that I'm designing it for people, not for me?
Yeah. And how does that play out? Have you seen that as people got more empathic, they were able to implement some of the stuff that you were doing?
Well, look, the beauty of this is behavioral economics is like a whole branch now of business and science that looks at why people do what they do, and you get so many of these examples now where we think people will do one thing and they do something very different. A good example: there was a childcare centre who were getting frustrated because parents would turn up late to pick up their kids.
Yeah.
Very common. So what they did was they put a fine in and said, if you turn up late, we're going to charge you $10. Now, our logical brain says, great, people will want to avoid paying $10. The number of people coming late will go down. No, the number of people turning up late went up because before they felt bad about it. Now they just pay a tax.
They don't care. Yeah,
I don't care. I don't feel bad anymore. So the emotional part of me actually is much better off paying the $10. And this is where and there's lots of examples in banking that we've done case studies with banks in the decisions they made and why they made them. And there's so many times you see good intent, unintentional consequences that they didn't see coming, and then the outcome looks like they were terrible people.
Yeah. Wow.
But actually, it's more complex than that.
And so you said before you can learn to be more empathic.
Yes.
How? Is that your IP? We can't get that off you.
No, we can. No. Look, the first part of it is just realizing that you don't see the world as it is. You make assumptions based on, that your experiences. Well, I call it your mental models, right? Your library of models in your head. So you don't see the world as it is. You see it through this lens. Now, to be able to understand why someone else does what they do, you need to be able to drop most of your models and explore. We're back to curiosity. Explore curiously what goes on in their world.
Yeah.
A really simple example: if you sneeze into a handkerchief in the train in Sydney, no one will care. Although that might have changed before COVID to now.
Yeah, right.
But if you did the same thing in Japan, people would care.
Yeah.
Now, sneezing into a hanky is not objectively good or bad, but contextually it has a very different meaning.
Yeah, and I don't know that people really understand that concept of that. You don't, like, what you see is not real almost. It is through a different lens. In fact, I only saw is it a meme? I'm sounding young now. A meme on Insta with the Dalai Lama saying the same thing yesterday. Is that how we see it is not? It's not how it is. It really isn't how it is. It's just
no. And so there's these two factors that go into our interpretation of the world: our mental models. So we take the data, and our mental models tell us what to look for and what's important. And then our mood has a big impact on how we interpret data as well. So if you're tired, frustrated, stressed, and anxious, then you'll actually have a different way of looking at the same situations. And I'm sure you're a parent. I'm sure you've had a bad day where you've yelled at the kids and then thought later on, wow, what a jerk. Why did I do that? It's because you interpreted the data and you responded differently based on your mood, not based on the objective nature of the situation.
Yeah, so true. And I'm lucky I've got kids that will tell me that. And that's even going back to them sometime later in the night and saying, you know what, Imogen, you were right. You called me out on that. And you're actually right. And I need to, apologize for that. So yeah, intriguing.
Yeah, and look, that comes back to the reason why that's hard for us is we love to be right. We love to have a sense of certainty, and it gives us comfort. And again, being more empathetic means I have to let it go a little bit of that certainty. I've got to step into the unknown, and I've actually got to fight against my brain a little bit. And that's a really important part of being more empathetic.
I've actually heard a psychologist talk about being more curious, even like to handle anger. So instead of if somebody pulls in front of you in the car or in the street, they're not really pulling in front of you. It's really about how you interpret that data that you've seen in front of you. And rather than going, you idiot, or giving them the bird or whatever, it's like ask a curious question of yourself. I wonder why they did that. I wonder, did they see that other, and you start getting more curious. Your anger drops in that. So curiosity, I love. I think it's phenomenal. You talked about understanding self and understanding others. Do you use tools for people to do diagnostics around that? Because we use the DISC tool to do some stuff around that. What do you use?
Yeah, I use team management systems quite a lot.
Oh, yeah, right.
TMS. Similar to Myers-Briggs, but it actually focuses a lot more on work style.
Yeah.
Like how do you show up at work and your preferences there.
Yeah.
But look, to be honest, I always caution people when using those tools, and I'm sure you do the same, that someone is not a explorer promoter. They're not a D or an S or a C, right?
Correct. Yeah,
That's just an indicator. It's a good conversation starter for kicking off what they really are, because they're way more complex.
Yes.
And this is where I see those things being really useful, is when they are conversation starters. They're particularly self-reflection tools, and they get people curious about other people, give us hints as to why they do what they do.
Yeah.
Where I see they're dangerous is where someone says, they'll do this because they're an ENTJ.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And they just pigeonhole. And I think that's a really dangerous thing to do. But the self-awareness part is really powerful.
I've seen over the last kind of 12 months or more, I've got a very close mate who's a high-profile psychologist, and his comment is anything that you can put in a box is rubbish. That was roughly what he said. And you start doing some research around Myers-Briggs, and Myers-Briggs actually doesn't stand up as a tool because of this boxing piece. That's where we like DISC as well, because we start to see things on continuums.
Yeah.
That's where you want to be, because that then takes in the complexity. But we've found too, using something like DISC, the conversation that starts and the reflection that starts is the kicker. That's where it really kicks in.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it's, there are some really insightful things out of these tools. Am I more analytical thinking or beliefs driven? Am I more, practical, or am I more creative? And how do I work with other people who are on a different part of that spectrum? That's where it gets really interesting.
That's when it gets really intriguing. So we have been very fortunate to be involved in a charity together over the years. And we met two amazing leaders in Roxana and Mayfield.
Yeah.
They are incredibly empathic. What have you learned from those guys? And maybe give listeners a little bit of a view of who we're talking about, so it's not just a little inside story here.
Yeah, so I met Kun Rochana, maybe 2009, so quite a while ago now. And, this is a lady who was basically sent to the south of Thailand after the Boxing Day tsunami to gather up any kids who'd been orphaned and help them. And, she didn't have any resources really, and didn't really know how it was going to work. But she was just committed to diving in and doing everything she could. And, obviously she's very fortunate, and it's been a great pleasure working with Hands Across the Water, who've supported that home. But through so many challenging situations, it was just her laser focus on the welfare of the kids. What can we do to support them? And I actually asked her, she's passed away now, but I asked her before she passed away, what's something that got her through? And she told me this one word that I actually have tattooed on my ribs now called misati. Misati. And misati, I'm probably pronouncing it poorly, but misati roughly translates to mindfulness. So when every time things got really hectic, she would sit back and just meditate. She would sit back and close her eyes and try and push the rest of that chaos out. And it helped her just to focus back on, hang on, what's really important here? What's the thing that really matters? What's the purpose? And I think that's something that, when I'm working with lots of different leaders who are busy and, they're all too busy. They've got too many meetings and there's too many things going on. I sort of think this was someone who was responsible for the lives of, nearly 100 children and who had no other support around her to sort of lean on in these times. And yet she still found it really powerful and important to keep that focus back on, hang on, what's the game we're playing here? What are we trying to achieve? And that was something...
And similar with Kunthil, right?
Yeah, and the thing that stands out with both of them in many ways was just the humour they bring to the situation at times. It's still about having a bit of fun. It's still about, yes, I've got terminal cancer and, we haven't got any money and kids are sick and I don't know how we're going to get through, but, that doesn't mean we can't play and we can't have fun and, keep building that sense of culture in our group. Matthew, she's been through, again, so many challenges and her dedication and passion to, really looking after the kids. She said something to me early on when I was up there visiting. I think it might have even been the first time I was there. She was very cautious, very defensive of the kids. I remember the first visit, my photos over the week went from being sort of 10 metres away, 8 metres away, and day by day they got closer and closer until we built that trust with the kids. And she said something that sort of brought it home for me. She said, look, if you're here, don't pity them. Don't pity the kids. They don't need your pity. Pity's a negative emotion and you'll want to get away from it at some stage.
Yeah.
I want you to love them. And if you don't love them, don't come. Because I need you to love them. I want you to love the kids because that's what's going to keep you coming. That's what's going to keep them alive. That's what's going to help everything to gel together. And, something that really stuck with me when I think about organizations and teams, like, do they love working together? Are they passionate about turning up? Because if you're just there to do a job, there's a good chance that you're going to get bored with it, frustrated with it. You don't want to be there anymore. But if you love it, then all the challenges in the world are achievable.
And so, if we talk about Kunthil and Kunrajana, they had that laser focus. They knew what their purpose was. And, I remember riding with Kunthil sometimes going, I don't even know how you're riding a bike, but you're riding this bike with me. But it was all about the kids. How does that reflect on leaders? How are leaders all about their staff? Are they all about their team members? Are we just too busy going to meeting and not getting done? Are we clear on the purpose? Like, that seems to be what we really need to tap into as leaders in business.
Absolutely. And look, I ran an offsite for a life insurance claims team a couple of weeks ago, and we actually brought in a charity who works with bereaved kids called Feel the Magic. Okay. And I brought them in because I thought there was a really close connection between an organisation that supports children who've lost a parent, a bereavement, or other family member, and the company on the other side that, when that person may pass away, they have to fulfil their obligations of the financial support to the family. Yeah. But what was really interesting is in insurance, you get really caught in spreadsheets and numbers and data, and you lose sight of a family over there who's just lost someone. And all of the emotional baggage and challenges and issues that wrap around that. And so by being able to bring these two organisations together, it actually let the insurance company say, wow, we don't tell stories about the people we support enough. We do reports on the data, but, we don't actually speak to the human experience. And that's where all the power is.
And what do you said you've been doing this now for 6 years. I don't hate the word pivot. It's not the word I'm looking for. But, as you think about the 6 years, what's changed? What have you refined? What are you seeing consistently come out from leaderships and leadership teams? And you go, actually, we need to adjust this. We need to refine this a little bit, this concept.
Yeah, I think it is shifting. But, if I reflect on my time in corporates, culture was the HR's problem. And many organizations changed HR to be called people and culture.
Yeah.
Okay, culture, we'll just throw it over in the corner there. You guys handle culture and we'll do the rest. And I think the shift that needs to happen, and is happening slowly, is now culture is everyone's responsibility and everyone contributes to it. Every single thing we do contributes to culture.
Yeah.
And our subconscious brains are putting together our interpretation of culture constantly throughout the day. And so I think it's the thing that I see leaders getting a bit more in tune with is they have to have a clear vision for what that culture will be. And then they have to look at what are the different behaviors and processes and ways of working, and what are all the tangible artifacts that we have to keep assessing and refining to make sure those things are aligned to that culture we want.
Yeah.
Because when I say to people, I want you to have flexibility, and then I put a policy in place that contributes to them not having flexibility, I actually start to break.
Yeah.
A break between what I want the culture to be and what the culture actually is. The culture is what people experience and feel. It's not the posters on the wall. And I think that's starting to change. And, I wrote a book recently around aligning culture and strategy. And it is about this whole concept that it's not good enough to say we want to have a nice culture and here are our 5 values words we put on a wall. That's not what your culture is. Your culture is the experience your people are having every second of every day.
I think it's what you said earlier. It's like it's how we do things around here.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily articulated. It's just this is what we do.
Yeah, it's felt and experienced. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's creating that amazing environment. And if you had your time again, now that you've been there, you're doing this wonderful consulting work, and you're doing lots of speaking, which is awesome. If you had your time again, would you change much?
Probably not. I mean, I'm really grateful for where I am and what I've created. I think there's lots of things that if I look back on, I could have done differently. I should have probably bought property in Sydney earlier. I should, there's those sorts of things that I'm sure many of us think about. But in terms of my career, I was very fortunate that I had no idea what I wanted to do. And that might sound strange, but I think that was a real blessing because I kept looking for something new and something different. And particularly in consulting work, I kept falling into places and learning, and it really helped me, I guess, get to that place of saying, well, hey, I'm not an expert, but I can see some patterns here, and I think if we can do things differently, we're going to make a big impact.
Yeah, that's really nice. And do you think moving forward you'll continue to speak on this topic? Do you think you'll add stuff to it? Like, is there more to learn about this?
Oh, look, every day, when I work with clients in particular, there's more layers, there's more complexity. The beauty of our world, and it would have been easy a couple of 100 years ago to think, wow, there's only so much we need to know. Yeah. There's only so much you can know about anything.
Yeah.
But every day we just find actually there's so much more complexity, there's so much more we can learn, and then we have to put all of these diverse things together, and there's just so much that we can do. So, look, I think from a speaking perspective and a business perspective, we have no idea why people do what they do.
Yeah, you're right. It's interesting, isn't it, that we are such a complex being. We just don't really understand ourselves, let alone understand other people.
No, we don't know how the brain really works, and we're just doing our best to work it out. So, the focus for me going forward is just keep exploring, keep learning. And, largely what I spend my time doing is taking the complexity of things like neuroscience, behavioral economics, psychology, neuroeconomics. There's all these different fields that are growing. And then how can I take some of that complexity and create it in a way that's practical and applicable?
People can get it and use it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So let's imagine you're sitting next to some young whippersnapper who's coming up through the ranks as a leader. If you were to give them, I don't know, we'll go with 3. If you were to give them 3 tips, what would be Daniel Murray's 3 tips for being a good leader? One's got to be curiosity, surely.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Be curious and interested in everyone. I think when you're a young leader, you sort of, who will I hitch my wagon to and who are the go-getters? And actually, sometimes you're better off going down to the front lines and sitting with people who are on the coalface and going, how do you do what you do? And tell me more about that. And that's interesting and really learning. I think that's one. I think the second thing I'd say to an emerging leader is find someone who can help you. Yeah. Whether it be a coach or a mentor, another senior leader, it might be a boss. And if your boss isn't the right person, find someone else.
Yeah.
Find someone to learn from, because the reality is you're walking a path that is going to be different than it's ever been in the past, but there's some things you can learn from them that'll help. And I think the third thing is focus on building leaders, not building a team. So good leaders build a team, but great leaders build leaders.
Yeah, right.
The difference there is, if I'm building my team, I can tell them what to do and how to do it, and I can give them the answers and they'll work okay.
Yeah.
If I build them as leaders, they'll be curious. They'll be asking questions. They'll be driving when I'm not looking. They'll be pushing me and helping me to lift as well.
Yeah.
And that's really the thing that I think drives those high-performing teams is a group that are all collectively looking to lead as they go forward.
Awesome. Mate, let's get one last question out for you before we go. Let's find out a little bit more about Daniel Murray, the person, the man that is Daniel Murray. So we shared quickly, and I think you and I are still the only 2 people to have rode around Thailand on a what do you call it? A
big ugly tandem, yeah.
Big ugly tandem. I think you and I are the only 2 to get it. That was one of the hardest things I've done in all life. Are you still riding?
Not as much. We've actually got one of those Peloton bikes that I jump on pretty frequently. But no, it's with a 5-year-old who's just started prep, it's a bit less time to be able to get out on the bike, unfortunately.
Cool. And you're a bit of a fisherman. You love to get out in the boat?
I do. I love it. I was out the other day fishing off Moreton Island. It's beautiful.
Nice. And are you doing much work with hands, or is there any rides for you in the future?
Yeah, Miranda and I will be heading back to Thailand in January to ride again. So I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, it's been a few years of not being able to get on a bike or get over there. So, yeah, I really can't wait.
Sounds great. Daniel Murray, a pleasure. Absolutely fantastic interview. Loved having you on board. All the best with Empathic Consulting, mate. You're kicking some goals, I know. So it's awesome.
Thanks so much, Craig. Take care, mate.
You too.